Good morning, WURD family. We are so excited to be celebrating Founders Day 2023. Give yourself a big round of applause for coming out on this gorgeous Friday. We'll share. We'll share. So it's always a real pleasure for me to gather my family together. We get together all the time, actually, but it's really wonderful to literally sit down and reflect on our father's legacy, our father's impact on our lives personally and our lives professionally, because as many of you may know, we are part of a family business. We all worked for my father. He was not just our father, he was our boss. And so we got to see him in many different arenas, many different situations, and learned at his feet, really. But today, because we're in this space, this is the space of the future home of WURD. And yeah, 3601 Haverford Avenue. My brother Charles, who's sitting to my right, is the developer. He is the brainchild of this project. And so, because of the fact that we're hosting this in this space, I thought we could focus our conversation today. My father was many things. He was a physician, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, very committed to the community, a media owner, but he also was a very committed land owner, and he really believed in land ownership as a pathway to self-determination and wealth creation. And so I wanted us to focus our conversation about our father today on that piece of his legacy. But I told my family they can really talk about whatever they want. But I thought we would start with Charles, who maybe you can tell us a little bit about this development and how that ties into your recollections of Dad.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so this project has been a long time coming. It really was initially supported by Councilwoman Blackwell. She's the one who sort of got this whole ball rolling. And so right now, we're sitting on the site of the new home of WURD, which is probably going to be about an 11,000, 12,000 square foot building with a cafe on the first floor and the entrance and gallery space for WURD. And then the second and third floor are going to be operational offices and studios. And there he is, Bennett Lomax, the president and CEO of the Lomax companies.
Bennett's my boss.
Yeah. So anyway, this site really goes from 36th to 37th, from Haverford past Mount Vernon to Wallace Street. And we're going to have WURD's new home is going to be here. We're going to have a new grocery store that's about 13,500 square feet. We're going to have a new medical center, which is about 15,300 square feet above the grocery store. And then above that, there's going to be 72 apartments. Across the street at the corner of from 37th, from Mount Vernon to Wallace is going to be a parking lot. Right now, we're building 32 LIHTC, low interest or affordable housing units over on Wallace Street. And then one of the most important components of the project is really the home ownership. We're going to have an affordable home ownership piece so that people that are living in this community, everybody sees what's going on, everybody sees the changing, but the key is what happens, can the community be owners of what's going on? And so this home ownership piece is probably one of the most important parts of the project, because you get to own something in a neighborhood that's going to be deed restricted at a certain area median income, and it's going to be, you're going to be able to appreciate the appreciation of the value in the land as soon as you buy it, as soon as you get ownership. So that to me is probably one of the principal philosophies of my father, which is you got to own land. I mean, that was his thing forever, all of my life. So anyway, I'm going to let the rest of these guys talk.
So, Mom, my mother, you guys were married, for 53 years? 50, so I always mess that up, 55 years. They were married for 55 years. And so you were with Dad. I mean, Dad always believed in owning the properties where his businesses were. He believed, and you told me the other day, he believed in not just owning what he owned, but owning everything around him. So tell us a little bit about, and just share some reflections and what you want to share about this whole, your partner, your 55-year-old partner. Not 55-year-old, 55-year partner.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess you can say we grew up together. When Brother Shamari opened, he paid tribute to the ancestors. And lest we forget the ancestors, Walter started his office in South Philadelphia, 1302 South 18th Street, yay South Philly. And he became affiliated with the South Philadelphia Health Action Committee. And I want to remember them. Carl Moore, Alice Walker, Mamie Nichols, Bob Russell, and although he wasn't in South Philly at that time, he was the radio man that introduced Walter to radio, and that was Cody Anderson.
Yes.
And that's on the ancestral side, but on this side, those who are still here, let's not forget Ron Hagler, Kenny Gamble, Marion Tasco, John White Jr., Calvin Bland, Joan Myers Brown, Vincent Hughes.
They're sweating.
And of course, best for last, Janny Blackwell. Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is just so wonderful, especially to me. And I just want to thank you all for being here and for supporting WURD. One love.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask Bennett. Bennett, maybe you can. Oh wait, Laura, do you want to go next?
Can I?
Laura is the oldest. So we're not in age order. It's Laura's the oldest. Thomas is the second oldest. Charles. Well, my mom's the oldest. Laura, Thomas, Charles, me, Bennett, and our sister Claire. We should have a chair up here for our sister Claire, who made transition May 31st, 2022. And she was very, very, very engaged and involved in building WURD, and she was such a critical part of our family as our general counsel and just as, you know, our dear, dear sister friend. So we miss her deeply. But Laura, do you want to go after that?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. And it's just amazing to see all of you all out here. So many familiar faces. Anyway, so I had asked Sarah, so what are we talking about? After she reminded us 20 times that this event is today. And she said about Dad's love of land, his philosophy on wealth and sustainability. So when I thought about it, I said, okay, I remember South Philadelphia Medical Center. I don't know, I think maybe Charles and Thomas.
I remember.
That little corner thing, that little corner office, and that he expanded. But what I remember is the excitement around seeing like the architectural drawings. I'm a very visual person, but my favorite part was definitely the design board. And I remember for every center, whether it was South Philly, Northwest, Grace Ferry, Maplewood, Dublin, there would always be this beautiful board. And it was like artwork to me. There would be the paint chips, there would be the fabrics for the chairs, there would be the desks, the tables, the office seat. It was just the rugs, and Dad picked out every single thing, probably with Mom, and input from others, but he was really very into this. And I saw it almost like a creative endeavor. But for every site, and it was top quality, even though a lot of people thought that when we started these centers in quote unquote underserved areas, that it was not deserving of such a beautiful facility. So that's one of the things that really stuck with me about Dad. And that sort of extended to when we worked in the prison system. I remember some coats of paint and fixing plumbing in some of the facilities just to make it, give people dignity and to make it livable, and where we could provide service and good for our staff as well. So even when we did our marketing, and I think when we had the magazine, I remember Dad would read everything, but he would also like feel the paper. I don't know if you all remember, he would always say, you know, this feels good. So my point is, and I think Calvin Bland sort of captured it this week earlier, when he said Dad would look at not only the macro, the big picture, but he would also look at the details. And he applied that also to, he would care for, at the end of his career, he cared for millions of people. But he also always came down as a physician to be able to care for that individual. So that's some of the memories that were really strong for me. Dad, and I see this, I also see his love of land, love of property was always connected to a vision, in my opinion. And it wasn't just like accumulation for accumulation's sake. It was strategy, it was sustainability, and it was to actualize something most of the time for his people. So I thank you all. And next.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Laura. I love that. Bennett, or who wants to go next? I'm just like the facilitator. Thomas is the oldest son, so he goes next. Yes, age order. No, here, take this.
Is this better? Yeah.
Yes.
While I know this discussion revolves around, I'll say, the success and the accumulation of land that my father had and believed in, I just want to take a second and talk about the spirit and the pride of the man. And when I say that, I remember many years ago, back in the early to mid 80s probably, I was in his office in South Philadelphia, and there was back then they had pharmaceutical reps. I'm not sure if they still exist or not, but there were pharmaceutical reps that came to visit the office. And this one particular gentleman came in and said hi to me. I said hi. And then we take him back to see my father. And he says, "Hey, doctor, how you doing? Is this your boy?" And my father said, "Yes, that's my son." Now, while that may not sound like much, for some reason, that really stuck with me. He showed true pride in the ones that he loved and cared for. And when I talk, and then so I took that example, tell that example, and then I talk about the spirit of it, because you fast forward to 15 years ago. I'm driving out of my driveway to down my street, and I see one of my neighbors. He stops me and says, "Hey, Thomas, how you doing?" I said, "Good. How you doing, man?" "Good, good." He said, and my youngest son, used to help him out doing yard work and stuff. So when he stopped me, he said, "How's the boy doing?" I looked at him and I said, "Isaiah's fine." You take that same example to 2 weeks ago, last week. I was in Philadelphia, I was down in Atlanta doing some work, helping out a friend of mine on something. And I'm meeting with the CFO, who happens to be a Caucasian fella, and a young black woman who's the program director. And several times during the conversation, I heard the reference, so much, girl. So at the time, I didn't say anything, but the next day when I met with him, the young lady came in first, and I asked her if she heard it, and did it bother her? She said yes. I said, "Fine, I'll handle it, I'll talk to him." Now, this is my first time meeting these folks, but it is what it is, right? So then the next day, that afternoon, when the young lady leaves, I take the CFO and I said, "Hey man, I just want to let you know, I heard several references to when you were talking about this young lady here, you called her girl this, girl." I said, "I know you don't mean much by it, but you really need to be a little more conscious and understand the feelings of how people feel." So I just wanted to share those stories to talk more about the spirit and the pride of the man as opposed to everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Tay.
Thanks, Thomas. that was Thomas Lomax. We are having a Lomax family conversation about the legacy of Dr. Lomax. Bennett Lomax is the. Oh, Charles started us off. So Bennett is the CEO of the Lomax companies and kind of has his hands in just about everything. He does a lot of work with us at WURD as well in terms of business development. So go ahead, Bennett. What do you want to talk about?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be here. Thank you for being here and honoring my father and honoring our family by coming out on a hot day and supporting WURD and really contributing to and growing the WURD family. It's so important to us. It was very important to Dr. Lomax, the whole development of WURD, and he was a guy, he lived in the present, but he also lived in the future. He was always having a vision of what things can be. He was a workaholic's workaholic. He worked all the time. If he wasn't doing rounds in my earlier part of my life and doing medical services, he was at home cutting grass and taking care of the house and just always doing something, always in motion. As that evolved, as his career evolved, he got more into health insurance and the commercial side of the healthcare business, and it was the same thing. He was nonstop, hard charging, always at it, and me and him, I was his youngest child. I spent a lot of time with him growing up, and if you're around him, you're somehow involved in the work he's doing. If you wanted to sort of converse and be in the moment with him, you were involved in what he was working on at the time, whether it was landscaping at the house or going through legal documents or various types of planning and thinking that he did to try to develop his vision and realize his vision for what something could be. He bought WURD. This was a stick meaning it was just a license. It wasn't a operating station at the time. I think it had a Latino format prior to our ownership, and he had this drive. He was working with Cody, working with my mother. He had this drive. My mother, they had this passion for what this could be for the community, and he was tireless and frankly, he couldn't be told what you can't do. That was you want to get him to do something, tell him he can't do something, and he was put a lot of energy into it, and he would just be thrilled to death. Maybe that's the wrong way to frame it, but he would be thrilled to see the crowd here today and just what WURD has become under Sarah's leadership and her really exceptional team's drive and effort. So, I mean, one time for the WURD team, for all the commitment and energy they put into it. I mean, I look around, I came in with my son, Lewis, who's 6. Lewis is here, and I got to come to the stage. I'm late, and I come in and I see Troy Wilmore. Troy, keep an eye on my son until my wife gets here. She's bringing up the rear, and it's like it's a family atmosphere, and all these people have been family to me and to us for a long time, and all of you all are family to us for a long time. One thing I think about, I'm thinking about Thomas's story. I'm thinking about some of the other comments that people made about Dr. Lomax. The word woke I don't know when woke became a dirty word, but for some strange reason, people are mad at wokeness. And my parents, not just my father, but my mother she might be woker. But my parents, the wokest, right, my parents, nobody was, woke and consciousness, that was a point of pride all my life. And so, whatever WURD can do, whatever we can do, whatever I can do to make woke what it really means again, I'm all for it. Like this is great. So thanks again, everyone, for coming out.
So,
Thank you all.
thanks, Bennett. So I want to spend a moment, because I think that, going back to my theme, which doesn't seem to be sticking, but my theme of land and land development and acquisition, I did want to see if one of you all, or several of you all, could speak to what I think is like the masterful karmic acquisition of land when, mom and dad bought the farm, the plantation, whatever you want to call it. I think Haki called it the work camp that our ancestors were enslaved on in Virginia, in King William, Virginia. My parents bought that plantation and have completely renovated it and reclaimed it. And to me, that is
Sarah,
like, yes.
They bought the plantation and then the plantation next to us.
Okay, they bought the plantation and the plantation next to it. Well, there you go. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I love that story.
So the way it
This is
started.
Charles Lomax.
I'm Charles Lomax. Thank you for being here. But the way it started is that when my father, in the early 90s, maybe in the late 80s, my father was gifted 50 acres by his sisters, his mother and his sisters. And the 50 acres were part of a 85-acre parcel that my grandmother's father owned. And so my father's original mission and objective was to get the original homestead of Fleming Harvey back together. So he went to the guy who owned this 325-acre parcel to buy back 35 acres to put the original Harvey parcel back together. And the guy, whose name was Temple Gatewood, who anybody who knows him knows he was a wheeler dealer. He was a nice guy, but he was a wheeler dealer. And Temple looked at him, he said, "Doc, why don't you just buy the whole thing? You have history here." And so they negotiated it, and ultimately my father bought the 325-acre property, which was called Aspen Grove Farms. After that, there was another parcel called Cool Spring, which was adjacent to Aspen Grove, which my father negotiated with the landowner. I think his name is Mr. Crewatch. They went back and forth. He had a really, really patient, intentional negotiation style.
It's called wear you down over time.
He went back and forth, and he'd show up. He's just like,
This is years. This is not
I
1
mean,
or 2 weeks.
this
This
guy,
is years.
he
They
wore
wrote
this-
letters back and forth.
letters and back calls and so forth. This was before the internet. Yeah, very much
For
so.
white owners of these
And
farms.
eventually he relented and sold Cool Spring. So I think Cool Spring was what, 100 acres? I don't know. There was like several transactions that now the property is 785 acres. And it's an amazing, amazing property. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's interesting about the property is in the front, in a walled area, is a graveyard where all the white ancestors live. And in the back is the slave graveyard where all of the other ancestors live. So it's a really, pardon me?
They're not marked. They're little small.
It's really
stone
just marking the
markers.
corners of the site. They're just corner
No
markers.
gravestones.
But the thing is, it's a really, really spiritual place, and it's a place I know I personally go there to get rejuvenated because it's amazing.
Yeah, I just want to recognize my sister Laura to my right, who really was the long oar in the water to figure out a lot of the family connections and, tapping into a lot of our family members down in Virginia. Our family, we got a lot of family in King William, Virginia, and Laura worked with our cousin Alvin and some others and put together the story of our family, and it continues to this day to continue to sort of like a body of knowledge that we're continuing to add to of where we came from, how far back can we go. We're all as black people have sort of an origin story that's kind of murky here in the United States, and Laura's really done a lot to suss that out and figure it out.
That's so sweet. Wow. Thank you, Bennett. So the last time I went to Aspen Groves was with Claire. my younger sister, who transitioned, and we went all over, but we also met with Cousin Alvin. And in keeping with what Bennett said in the beginning about the acquisition of Aspen Grove and then the adjacent plantation, our, was it great-great-grandmother, Jenny? Great-great-great-grandmother, my father, okay, our great-great-great-grandmother, Jenny, who lived at Aspen Grove, was actually lent out to help someone at Cool Spring. And she ended up being impregnated by the son of the person there, as well as the owner of Aspen Grove. So she had this unusual family structure with two half-white children, and she also had a black family. But that was life, just an insight of life on that plantation. So I just wanted to share that little bit of a story, but thank you. It's an amazing, and one last thing. In looking up that history, I figured, you go to the Bible, the family Bible, of course they were white owners. Nothing about us, and so I kept looking. I went to the Historical Society. Finally, in the property records, along with the cattle and the farm equipment, was a list of, and I saw Lomax. Who was it? Virginia Dare. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and
Yeah.
Sarah.
Well, we're going to get ready to wrap up, but I just wanted to give anyone who wanted to give a final thought or a final takeaway. Beverly? Anybody? What is it?
Stay woke.
Stay woke, y'all. Stay woke.
Everybody needs to get woker.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for coming out.